a quick look at some of the pictures I've taken over the last, well, few days, and going back to the summer, I did manage to get out and get a few other shots during the summer. Just to give you an idea, I'm not I'm not great at landscape or photography like that. Urban, street, a little bit better, but I mainly stick to weddings. So we're here to talk about the Z5 and my journey with it since I got it in February. So we're talking about 10 months ago now. And I checked on Lightroom. During this year, during the wedding season, I have taken 17,000 photos with the Z5 and about 23,000 I think with the D780. So as you might expect, I've got to know it quite well. When I bought the Z5, it was really to be for a specific thing at weddings. At weddings, I like to mix with the wedding party, get close to guests, and just sort of stand there and sort of hold it up and get some shots. And so I wanted a camera that was quiet, smaller than a DSLR, less conspicuous. I didn't want people to turn around and say, oh look, there's the photographer. I wanted them just to carry on doing what they were doing, and I could just get completely natural, candid documentary shots. That's what I got it for. Never intended it to replace or do any of the work that I did with the D780, which was my main camera. However, within a day of getting the Z5, I realised that it was probably going to be more than that, because the previous 2 years I'd had the Sony A7 III, and therefore I had still is regarded as one of the best all-round general purpose mirrorless cameras you can get, the A7 III. And so I was comparing this to that, and my initial thoughts were, well, let me just run through. First of all, it feels and it felt and it just is much nicer to work with than the Sony. The ergonomics, it's a tiny bit bigger, but that tiny bit makes all the difference. On my Sony, I either had to have a battery grip or I did get a plate, about 10mm thick plate to put on the bottom, because it was so uncomfortable to hold. This, I don't know what they've done to it. As I say, it's only a few millimeters deeper than the Sony, but it is just, I don't need a grip, I don't need a plate on the bottom. It's just lovely to work with. I can use it one hand, I can get to enough controls to make it usable to shoot one-handed. The dials and buttons are just so much better than the Sony. They really are. The image quality, and by the image quality, I'm not talking sharpness, I'm talking the look, the character, the feel, the depth, all the other stuff other than sharpness. The colours so much nicer on the Nikon. So I was instantly very pleased with it. Of course, what you're thinking is, yeah, but what's the autofocus like? And when I first got this, it was obviously only a few weeks after I'd got rid of the Sony, so I was able to do a very good comparison. Face detect and eye autofocus, yeah, it's really pretty close. I didn't find it had become so bad that it wasn't usable. It was usable in all the situations that the Sony was. Now, maybe as a wedding photographer, maybe I'm not pushing the autofocus as far as some people would do, but I didn't have any problems I haven't had any problems with any of the autofocus features and functions on this for the entire year period. We'll talk about that a bit more in a minute, but yeah, initially it was just a tiny bit not quite as good as the Sony, but not too far off. But it was a heck of a lot easier to switch from face detect and eye autofocus to other focusing modes, because we've got the U1, U2, U3, and I set those up right at the beginning to switch between focus modes. So if I was having trouble with the camera picking up someone's face or their eye, then I could simply do that, and I'm done. I'm in D9 focus, or I can press the function 2 button and it pops up with the tracking box in the middle. So it was so quick and so easy to use after the Sony, where I'd had to program some of the other buttons at the top there to switch between focus modes, and I was never that comfortable with it. Now, going back to face detect and autofocus, you're going to be surprised, but I very rarely use it. The reason being is that unless I'm photographing one person, then face detect and autofocus, you can bet your life it's going to pick out the wrong person. No big deal, you think. I can use the joystick at the back to switch across to someone else. Yeah, you can. But in doing that, and then it picks out an eye and it's the wrong eye, and I've got to go back again, and it jumps to the other person, and it's just, excuse me, but it's just a pain in the ass. It's a great, I was going to say a great gimmick. It's not. It's a bit better than a gimmick. But seriously, I find I don't use it. I use D9. I move the focus point around for a lot of the shots. If I'm not using that, then I will use the center tracking box, put that over someone, the person I want, put that over their face, move around, stay locked onto them. And with the update that came out 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, that is even better, and that works wonderfully for anything that's going to be moving. So AF wise, I'm totally happy. I'm a member of the Facebook Nikon mirrorless camera group, and I would say that probably 40% of the posts that go on there are about mirrorless camera AF, which kind of saddens me a little bit, really, because this isn't about the autofocus, it's about everything else. It's about the functionality, it's about the image quality, it's about how usable it is. It's not just about the autofocus, and specifically face detect and eye autofocus. And as I say, gradually as I went through weddings, I used the face detect less and less and less. Functionality wise, this is absolutely brilliant. It is so much better than my D780. I find I use the U1, U2 and U3 settings for not only different focus modes, but let me just tell you. So the U1 is set to manual, and that is completely manual. No, almost completely manual. It's manual mode, so I can set the speed, I can set the aperture. I do have the ISO set to auto ISO. But I've only got to press the ISO button and move the front dial, and we switch off auto, and then I can use manual or ISO as well. So the exposure, completely manual. I've got it set up to manual focus with peaking, and if I just click the switch on the lens from autofocus to manual, I get the peaking come up. If I don't want that, then I can just switch back to auto on the lens, and the peaking disappears. Sometimes it's a bit of a pain, actually. Most of the time it's not, but occasionally you don't want it, and I just rely on seeing what's actually in focus. On U1, because I'm using manual focus, I've got the top function button, the function 1 button set to zoom in. So I can position it, hit that button. I haven't really got to move, I can just do that. I just did it, and that will have zoomed in. I can focus perfectly, click the button again, which I just did, and it zoomed out. I can take the shot. It is, for manual focusing, it is brilliant. And believe it or not, over the last 8-10 weddings, I've been using manual focus a lot more since I got this guy, the 58 1.4G. It's so nice to manual focus. There's the perfect amount of resistance. It's not as good as a dedicated manual focus lens, I agree. I've got the 51.2 AI lens, and that is a bit more, what should we call it, creamy, if you like, on the focus ring. But this is plenty good enough. It's very easy to use. There's no slack, there's no backlash. Beautiful to focus manually. And I find, let me just digress onto manual focus just for a moment. I find that manual focus really does for me anyway, it affects the way I take the photos. It slows me down, especially in manual mode. I've got to play around, I've got to think about the speed. Have I got the set right? The aperture, what do I want the photo to look like? As I say, normally it's on auto ISO. Okay, I can use the exposure compensation if I just want to lower it or increase the general sort of level of exposure, but still let the camera sort things out as I move around. And then by using manual focus, I don't know, I just become more engaged with the composition, with what I'm trying to get. Now, obviously, I can't use it all the time. There's lots of times at a wedding when people are moving and it's just too busy, it's too hectic to use manual focus, for me anyway. And so I just go to one of the other modes. But try it out, try manual focus. It really does affect the way you create photos enough. U2 on here is set to face detect, so it's wide area. Now on the Z5, the recent update I hoped was going to give us face detect with a smaller box. It hasn't. We've still only got face detect with the wide area, with the full screen. So if you've got 4 people in the shot, that's the problem. It doesn't know which one you want. It'll just pick out the closest one, or the one with the most contrast, or the one that's looking at you rather than one that's only got sort of looking at you sideways. So you can't really say what it's going to pick out. And therefore I've got U3, which is D9, so it's the normal D9 on AFC, back button focus obviously, and I can move that focus point around to whoever I want it with the composition I want, and we've got the shot. Or if I'm in U2 and the face detect is picking up the wrong face amongst these 4, as I said earlier, I can just hit the function 2 button, brings up the center point tracking box, back button focus, put that over the person I want in focus, and get the shot that way. So as a wedding camera, it's been absolutely wonderful. It really has. And within 4 or 5 weddings of using it, it became my main camera. The D780 I really only use now. The way I use this at weddings is this either has the 85 1.4G lens on or the 58 1.4. The D780 has the 35 lens on most of the time. If I think I need a zoom lens for a certain situation, then I'll put the 24 to 70 on the D780. So this gets most of the shots, and I only have to resort to the D780 for things like the bride throwing the bouquet, where I want 7 or 8 frames a second, so I use the high speed burst on the D780. And low light performance, this, for most things, it's perfectly fine. Dark churches, dark wedding receptions and that ceremonies, it's not a problem at all. If you imagine walking into a room at night, walking into your bedroom and turn on the bedside lamp, that's the sort of level of light. This is still okay at that level of light. If it gets any darker than that, then it does struggle, in which case I would go for the D780. So sometimes on the first dance I would tend to go for the D780 because it's dark. I need decent autofocus because people are moving around. We've got very quickly changing light conditions with strobes and all sorts of flashing lights. I do find the D780 is a little bit better than that. How the D780 would compare to say the Z6 II in that situation, I don't know, but I'm now certainly considering for next year changing the D780 to a Z6 II. Considering, I haven't made my mind up yet. I do still love occasionally to have an optical viewfinder, so it's by no means certain that I should get a Z6 II. But if you're considering getting a Nikon mirrorless camera, I cannot recommend enough the Z5, unless you need more than 4.5 frames a second. or really crazy low light performance, that will do the job brilliantly. And let me just quickly mention lenses. Through the year I've changed lenses. You've probably seen some of the videos about that, and I've now ended up for the last few weddings with my dream team, which is the 85 1.4 G lens. That's just gorgeous. It's absolutely stunning. And as I said, with the 85 on here and the 35 on the D780, it's very easy just to pick up a different camera and get the shot. Fantastic. I love the 58 1.4 as well. If we're in a smaller room, if I haven't got the space to use the 85 as the longer lens, then I will use the 58. And of course my 135 f2 DC lens, defocus lens, which I will use on the D780 for certain shots. When things slow down at a wedding and people are sitting around, standing around in groups at the bar talking, that is absolutely fantastic for getting really close in, just gorgeous sort of portrait, documentary, candid portrait shots. It just produces the most wonderful images. And of course pictures of the bride and groom as portrait shots, perfect as well. I hope you found that useful. Happy to answer any questions or queries or comments. Drop them in the box below, and thank you very much for watching. And if you'd like to subscribe, please subscribe. Thank you very much. Cheers for now. Enjoy your photography.